Right. Okay, so objectives of today are to kind of give you a bit of background information on ThinkGrid and myself, give you a bit of a brief history of what cloud computing is. Then I'm going to dive into a little bit about what the benefits are about cloud computing and the way that we can use cloud computing to add a real competitive dynamic edge to the way that we work. And then I'm going to give you a very quick intro into the Estate Agent Cloud and who those guys are and obviously the reasons why they've been contacting you. Today, what I really want to do is to kind of arm you guys with all the information you need just so you can have a look at your cloud computing and try and understand whether this is going to be something that's going to be applicable to your business. But more importantly, I want you to try and understand that this is going to offer you a real competitive edge if you consider these services for your business. So, a little bit about ThinkGrid. So, ThinkGrid is a cloud services provider that provides a number of technologies that are delivered through the internet and through our data centers. Things like desktop computing, things like software as a service. These services we don't deliver directly. We work with a number of partners who specialised within their sector, and they deliver those services for us. They provide the support and services to the end user. Now, ThinkGrid itself is specifically steeped in the hosting industry. We've been going as a group of individuals, and we've been working within the industry for the past 15 years. We set up an organisation back in 1998 called IANA, and then we merged that organisation with a much larger American company, and providing kind of managed hosting and web services for small to medium-sized businesses. And then we expanded into the kind of enterprise market, looking after the kind of likes of kind of Coca-Cola and Shell and these types of brands, where we providing kind of high-end managed services, providing IT services that are delivered, or specific applications which are being delivered to those businesses. And so we've got a lot of experience in building out large-scale data centers. We grew that UK company, and we're tasked to grow that UK company into Europe, and then we eventually took it into Australia as well. And it was only a few million pounds as an organisation back in 1998, 1999. I joined in 2000. Within about a 5-year period, we grew that organisation to around 70 to 80 million pound turnover. So, and that was through acquisitions, that was through startups, some startups in France, Belgium, much of the acquisitions were in Germany. There was a couple of very large hosting companies that we bought out in Germany and in Australia. And I guess the experience there is building out data centers specifically, understanding how to put networks together and understanding how to deliver those services over the internet. And so the idea of where we've all kind of gone our separate ways as individuals, and I went to a managed service integrator looking after banks and airlines and travel organisations. Our CEO, Rob Lovell, he went to a virtualization company, set up the UK division of that virtualization company. And it's while there that Rob had this idea around the delivery of IT services, specifically email, desktop computing and storage, and making them more consumable for businesses. And it's this idea of understanding of how we put together data centers, understanding how we provide lots of high availability, and then delivering those services to businesses. And what we do now is we provide a mechanism in which IT partners can get access to these services very easily and deliver them to customers. So this kind of brings me on to what is cloud computing and what is the cloud? I mean, and then they're two separate things, but in a way they're very similar. Now, to understand any of this, really what we need to do is we need to kind of go back a little bit. We need to go back to way back into the 1950s and 60s and 70s and look at how we were building computing, how we were building compute resource. And back in those days, what we were doing is we were building out very, very large infrastructures that had very powerful devices, machinery, computing, and you'd have some form of way of accessing that information on premise. What we saw as time went on, later on, we saw more powerful infrastructures and what we call mainframe computing, and then we started to see ways that we could access that information remotely, whether that's from different offices, whether that was from different government buildings. These were the preserve of very large corporations and government agencies, and so these are very, very expensive, very cumbersome, I suppose, facilities that were housing all this very, very important data. And so what you saw was this access of this flow of information and the power of this information, allowing people to access it from multiple locations. But there's lots of different networks out there with lots of different types of technology and information, and none of it was all linked together. So there's different types of information you'd be able to communicate with another type of information. So it was very fragmented. And so what you saw in kind of the 70s and 80s was this change of trying to standardize information, trying to standardize the technology so computing can continue to communicate with each other without having to have a conversion of understanding of different technology. And so you have the rise of Microsoft, the rise of Apple, trying to fight it out to provide what is effectively a standardized communication, a standardized understanding of how we use technology and applications. And the rise of Microsoft was a huge shift, a paradigm shift in the way that technology is delivered these days. What Microsoft did is, rather than having lots and lots of powerful machinery or machines in big facilities connected to very, very dumb terminals, effectively, which were the kind of the old green screen days, if anybody can remember the devices that still are kind of used maybe in shopping facilities these days, kiosks and stuff, where there's kind of very basic information that needs to be displayed. And what you saw with Microsoft was the creation of very powerful applications that were hosted locally or run locally and stored locally, but also we had very powerful machines like PCs were becoming 10 a penny. That's this Amstrad, was fighting it out with other suppliers and IBM, trying to get the desktop PC not only in businesses but into every home in the country. And in a way, they've succeeded to do that because most people these days have some form of way of connecting to a PC, whether that's at home, whether that's at office, whether that's in a library. These things are synonymous of what we do every day now. And so what you saw with Microsoft was this communication explosion of how people would actually access information and do new exciting things with technology. After that, what you saw is in the late 80s was a kind of an overview of how we try to understand how we can communicate with all these devices that we're all propping up and all these different types of communication. And there was a research scientist in CERN where they were developing an idea where he was developing an idea of how to connect all these machines up with a single language, which is obviously HTML, hypertext markup language. And that was the birth of the ARPANET. And the ARPANET was a way that research scientists could communicate with each other all around the world. And that was the beginnings of the internet. And the internet, I suppose, the internet is the commercial birth of the internet is 1995. This is where people kind of associate the birth, the explosion of the commercial internet. When most people were started to have PCs within the house, but also they were having PCs coming with modems. Not only would you be having a device that you'd have to have a floppy drive that you would take to another machine, and then you would download that information from that floppy drive onto that other machine. We were communicating with each other, and we could pass information from device to device over the internet. And so that's the birth of the commercial internet. And obviously, everybody knows now that those 5 years was a huge explosion where vast amounts of money was pouring into this new way of communicating, this new commerce, and exorbitant amounts of money that probably wasn't well thought out, but it exploded effectively a way that people were communicating and doing business online, and come to 2000, where we obviously see a bit of the bubble burst. But what we do see is this understanding of how we depict what all these different systems are, how we draw a data center, how we draw the data center with all these different devices and communication services all connecting into it. And it's this depiction of what the internet is when you draw out the internet, you actually draw it as a cloud, as a graphical cloud. And this is effectively what we're talking about. So when you're hearing all these different businesses, and specifically, Microsoft and Google, talking about, the cloud and what is the cloud, and trying to associate with something that's, quite kind of very new, in reality, it isn't. The cloud effectively is just a metaphor for the internet, which in fact means this is something you've been using already for many, many years now. So that means things like Yahoo, that means your internet banking, that means Hotmail. All these different services that you've been connecting to over the internet are effectively services over the cloud, which are effectively what we call cloud computing. So the cloud is the internet, and cloud services or cloud computing are the services that we are actually using that are going over the internet, or effectively the cloud. And so what we actually have is this understanding of trying to associate these different types of services and trying to pigeonhole them a little bit. And so over the last few years, what you've seen is this umbrella of the cloud and the cloud computing, and trying to really put some of these technologies into silos. So you have software as a service, you have platform as a service, and you have infrastructure as a service. And software as a service is all the things I just mentioned now, just a minute ago, which is things like, accessing your banking, Yahoo, Google Mail, all those kind of things that you've already been used to using. Then there's kind of platform as a service and infrastructure. So now the infrastructure service piece is the data center. Those are the physical attributes of what we make, how we deliver services over the internet. Those are the servers, the hardware, the storage, the backup, the redundant power supplies, the facilities, the secure data centers that people don't know where they are or what types of buildings they are, but they're housing millions and millions of bytes and bits of data, and billions of dollars worth of revenue that have been driven through these facilities. And so that's infrastructure. And then you've got platform as a service. The platform as a service is a way to dynamically manage those resources that we have in those data centers. So in reality, as I said, these are the things that that are being projected out there in the market, that are they're kind of saying that these things are fantastically new, and businesses are becoming slightly wary of new technology, and what we want to try and get across as a message to businesses, that this technology isn't necessarily new. The ideas behind this isn't necessarily new. This goes back to many years. Accessing information securely from remote locations, or networking, connecting to networks, delivering services over the internet, which is effectively the cloud, is not a new thing. So you should be rest assured and not necessarily concerned about having your company data stored in the cloud, because your personal records are stored in the cloud, whether it's government information, your banking information, your health records in some respects. This information is already there, and so therefore the last, I suppose, for some smaller businesses, the last part of this evolution is moving what they would normally have hosted in their office on a high street, maybe, is moving that into a secure location where there's the provision for more security, more reliability, and more flexibility for the services being delivered. And that kind of brings us on to the kind of bits around the benefits of what cloud computing can really offer businesses. And one of the key things here that people like to talk about is this notion of no capital expenditure, and that means effectively what you're looking at is moving each of the cost centers, whether that's the hardware, whether that's the software, whether that's the power, whether that's the cooling, whether that's the redundancy, all these kind of things that you need to consider when you're delivering services on premise, is you're moving those into the data center and moving all that management and all that configuration, all that complexity into the data center. All you're really concerned about is the delivery of a service to you, and that delivery of a service can be anywhere. It can be anywhere. You could be in a hotel, you can be on your mobile device, your PDA, your tablet, whatever it is. You can be in far-flung places of the world, whatever it is. You can still access that information because it's being delivered to you, not from a small device with poor upload speed in a local office. And so, that makes it much more cost effective because we consider, reducing the costs of our power consumption, reducing our capital expenditure. We can focus very, very specifically on a specific service for a group of people, and we can flex that service for those groups of people. So that means it makes it very, very low and predictable in terms of how we're utilizing those services, and it makes it very clear about the costs. So, we can understand that, each user has a specific requirement, and we can tailor the services for those specific requirements rather than providing all services for all users and only some of those users not actually having to use those services at all. And one of the key things here, which it's been a funny old year in some respects in terms of natural disasters all around the world. I'm sure we have plenty of natural disasters around the world. But look at the interesting year we've had here in the UK, where beginning of the year there was huge disruption with all the snow we had. Then we had the riots here in the UK. Businesses were severely affected by the snow that we had and the severe weather we had early in the year. They just couldn't get their staff to work. And when staff can't get to work, the business is losing revenue effectively. And there's no provision. In most businesses, there's no provision for some way to continue operations or continue service to their customers. And there's no possible way of recovering if the building is burnt down due to rioting. These are incidents that can happen. It's not that they don't happen; they can happen. And so businesses have to prepare for that. Businesses have to consider that just having a single tape drive locally is not enough. It isn't. It's the start of something, but it isn't enough, because effectively that tape can degrade. Effectively, tape can be lost, and effectively, if you can't get to the office, you can't replace that tape, and then if there's a fire, whatever it is, all of those, the worst thing scenarios all at once, then effectively that business can go out of business. You can't read business contacts for the last 10 years. You haven't got any data for whether it's the images, for the properties. You've lost everything. And so it's so important for business to consider business continuity plan and disaster recovery. And right out of the box, cloud computing can offer businesses that, because these services are not stored locally. They're provisioned to you over the internet, and there's multiple tiers of redundancy within the data center, and that information is replicated to another data center in case that data center, for whatever reason, does have a problem. So, and it talks about this element of high availability. This is a fundamental part of the delivery service of cloud computing, which means that it makes it more scalable, and from the point of, if you need to add 20 more users the next day, you can add 20 more users the next day. You want to take those 20 more users because it's seasonal, you want to take them away, you can take them away, and all you're paying for is the resources that you're using. And this kind of comes into the next slide and talks about a little bit about real world benefits. What are the real world benefits? This will make that a little bit more tangible to understand. Typically what we find in businesses, that demand is somewhat predictable. It's going to go up, it's either going to go down. It's predictable. But traditionally, when we're purchasing our hardware, that growth or that installation of those services is completely disjointed, because we're having to purchase service whether we're a startup, whether we're an established business. We're having to purchase services to consider the long term. So, we have to purchase these services with a large capital expenditure. But the problem with that is that user demand is always flexing. So if user demand is always flexing, and we're buying our hardware in these kind of lumps, where it's not cost effective, it hits our cash flow, then there's obviously an inefficiency in cost, because ultimately, when the users aren't necessarily utilizing the infrastructure and to its optimum, then there is a huge disconnect about how much resources are available to how much is being used, and that's very typical to most businesses. But then also on the flip side of that, when the business is growing or it's seasonal and the user demand becomes far greater than what resources are available on the systems that are in the business, then users' services are affected. But cloud services effectively don't work like that, because ultimately the resources, as I said, are delivered to you, and you can dial them up, dial them down, a bit like, you know, your heating within your house. You know, if it's a bit colder, you know, you turn it up. If it's a bit too warm, you turn it back down. And cloud services are effectively like, it gives you that amount of control. It gives you that ability to can say, well, you know, we have this amount of users within the business at the moment. We can dial them down, or we have X amount of users and the business is growing, and we can dial them up. So hopefully, just to recap, I've given you a little bit of an insight to what all this technology is, and an understanding of how it can help businesses, and whether that's from a resource point of view, whether that's from a disaster recovery point of view, whether that's from a financial point of view. But as I said, one of the key things that I want to get across to businesses today is about this notion that this is very, very new technology, and it is some elements in what we do that are continually redeveloped, but the actual idea about moving technology or moving data away from the location that the business is in and into the data center is nothing new, and so you shouldn't be fearful of that. And the other key thing here is obviously take away is an understanding that these services can really add real value to the business, because it gives people flexibility to change the way that they operate as a business, and you know, it gives flexibility in the way that you're managing your finances as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to capable hands of Paul, Estate Agent Cloud. Estate Agent Cloud, one of our premier partners. They specifically obviously deal within this particular sector, and we've kept together a number of services and tailored services that work within this sector. And Paul's going to run through Estate Agent Cloud and some of those products. Paul.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Ibi. Hello, everyone. I may have spoken to some of you already. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Paul Honasutua. I'm the Technical Director here at the Estate Agent Cloud. I'm going to keep it brief because I know we're short for time, so I'm just going to give you a quick sort of overview of who we are and the services that we offer. Okay, so the Estate Agent Cloud was incorporated off the back of years of supporting estate agents, understanding their needs and their requirements. So that's where our kind of niche and our expertise comes into it. Now, with the cloud, it's our belief that the technology is a real opportunity for the sector that we work in. It's a kind of technology that, as Ibi mentioned, it enables us to manage our costs while increasing our productivity and still remaining competitive in today's markets. Speaking of the markets, obviously they're quite volatile at the moment. It's all doom and gloom, unstable house prices, poor mortgage lending, and just general economic instability with the Eurozone and everything else. So it's important for estate agents to become sort of to be able to manage and control their costs more effectively, but whilst still maintaining that high level of efficiency. So the Estate Agent Cloud can help estate agents do this in a number of ways via all of our services that I've put up there on the slide. All these services tied together just give the sort of the business function to enable to run in a much more efficient manner. Typically, these services mainly were available to large corporations, so bigger finance, bigger corporations such as banks or telecommunications, the kind of companies that previously had this sort of financial backing to invest a load of money into this kind of technology, who also demanded that high level of security and availability. And basically what cloud computing does, it unlocks these services, making them financially viable for businesses of any size. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of some of these sort of the more common cloud products, and I'm going to start with Cloud Desktop. So we're all familiar with desktops or laptops. You probably use one every day. You're probably sitting at one at the moment. It's the machine that we carry out our work function, and it connects you to the network and your servers. And it's the machine you just do your day-to-day sort of basically what a cloud desktop does. It's exactly the same thing, but it's hosted in the cloud. So instead of having all of your information sitting in that box, sitting on your, on your floor, on your desk, all that information is stored safely up in a hosted cloud environment. So what are the benefits of that? Well, there's lots of benefits, not only financially, but for productivity as well. For example, you can access your desktop from anywhere, from pretty much any device. So iPhones, Blackberries, iPads, it's just a little bit more convenient. If you're sitting on the train, you forget to do something, you can just whip out your iPhone, connect your desktop, do what you need to do, and then just close it again. It has built-in disaster recovery. Now, what that means is basically, if the hard drive on your desktop, for example, had died, all of your local data on that desktop, or the settings, or the programs, or the favorites, they would also die with it. People say to me, it's okay, I'll back up my desktop. That's fine, but recovering that desktop is still going to take you time, and it's still going to cost you money, and the chances are you probably won't get everything back the way it was before you had the failure. Same thing applies to laptop users. Obviously, it's commonplace for people. We always hear people leave their laptops on the train, or they get their car broken into and the laptop's taken. If that is the case, then obviously your data goes with that laptop. Now, the thing with a cloud desktop is literally you could take your laptop, take your desktop PC, go throw it in the river, pop down to Dixon's or PC World, get yourself a cheap, thin client PC machine, come back, plug it in, and you're up and running exactly the same as you were before, with no difference at all. The added benefit of the cloud desktop is also, as I mentioned, you could buy a cheap PC. They run on things called thin clients, which basically they start from around £150 to buy. There's a picture of one on the slide. They're about 20% the size of a standard desktop PC, and they use much sort of less electricity than a normal PC. They take up less room. They make less noise, and because they've got no moving parts, they tend to be much more reliable, therefore reducing your maintenance costs. Also, with Cloud Desktop, you can always be on the latest version of Windows or Office. Windows 8 is due to be released in the not-so-distant future, and again, people will just be playing catch-up. And what tends to happen is people don't upgrade their software. They just wait until the PC dies or it needs renewing, and then they upgrade the PC, which in turn upgrades the software. And what happens is causes problems running mixed versions of software on the business network, causing incompatibility issues, which then adds to your support and maintenance costs. Okay, so cloud servers, we're just going to briefly go over some cloud servers. A server is probably what you guys have got sitting in your back office or somewhere in the office that's running all of your applications, your emails, storing your data. Same concept with the cloud PCs. The cloud server obviously sits up in the data center, and it would be that hosts all of your data, your applications, and your emails. So that machine in your back office is now redundant. You don't need to run it. You don't need to keep maintaining it. The benefits of the cloud servers are the fact that it's quick and easy to deploy. As Ibby mentioned, you can add and remove more users on the fly. It gives you the freedom to up and down scale. So if you wanted more disk space, for example, more memory or more processors, you can do this at the click of a button. We've got full redundancy built in, same as the cloud desktops, and again, as Ibby mentioned earlier, 99.99 high availability. And again, you simply can't get that that availability from any other solution without investing tens of thousands of pounds. The cloud servers are located in our secure data centers. These data centers are advanced. They're fitted with things like fire suppression kits. They've got secure access. They've got multiple internet feeds. They've got multiple electricity feeds. So they're pretty much bulletproof in terms of you know, ever going down. Because they're all virtualized as well in a data center, all of those resources are pooled in a sense, so it minimizes wastage. The environment is obviously a big issue these days, which also means that by sort of, if everyone went cloud, it would reduce your carbon footprint. The problem with that is most company servers that run in-house tend to be running at less than half capacity. So you imagine all of that wasted capacity spread over millions of businesses. Think of all that energy that's being wasted, and the money as well to obviously pay for that energy that's being wasted. So if everybody went cloud, for example, the waste would be much less, better for the environment, better for people's pockets. Okay, so apart from the environment, what are the other benefits of to not having a big, noisy, heavy, expensive server sitting in your office running 24/7? Well, for a start, you don't need to back up your server there. The cloud server does it automatically. So you won't need the backup drives, you won't need the backup stage, the fireproof safe to put the backups in. You won't need that uninterruptible power supply. So an uninterruptible power supply basically means that if you have a power cut or a power spike, your server and the hardware is protected. You don't need to worry about securing that server. So in the event of a burglary, if someone steals your server, you, for example, need to make sure that when the insurance company comes out, they're happy enough that that server was securely in a secure location that they will pay out. It has been known, obviously, that it's just been sitting on the floor somewhere, and the insurance company has said that no, sorry, that's null and void. Okay, so cloud does all of these things literally in a matter of minutes. It's also worth mentioning that a typical server is replaced every 3 to 4 years. Now, with the cloud server, you simply add more resources as you go along. So you're avoiding the long downtime, all the added hardware expense and maintenance costs. And when you think about a typical server install, with the software, everything else, you're talking, minimum of 5,000, just to get a server replaced and in. Okay, cloud VoIP, voice over IP. Now, basically, cloud VoIP is, to put it simply, it's a phone system, but it's hosted in the cloud. So, an internal phone system, but it's just sort of cloud-based. So, where traditionally the phone system would be quite an expensive install and quite an expensive purchase, what the cloud VoIP gives you the freedom to sort of pay per extension. So you get up and running without requiring sort of the expertise or the capital expenditure. Instead, what you're paying is a fixed, transparent monthly fee for the lines. It's feature-rich, so Cloud VoIP has the same functionality you would expect from any traditional phone system. So, for example, you can set up call forwarding, hunt groups, voice menus, and obviously much more. It's scalable, so as I mentioned, it's a pay-as-you-grow model. So what that means is basically you don't need to commit to expensive hardware. You just add more handsets or add more extensions as you go along, and you'll never grow out of it. It's not like going out and buying a piece of hardware that has 20 extensions, for example, and then you've got all of a sudden 25 members of staff. You need to upgrade your phone kit. Location independent, again, as with our other cloud products, your employees will be integrated into the organization's phone system from anywhere that has an internet connection, from their home, from the office, from abroad, on their mobiles while they're sitting on the train. Okay, Cloud Exchange. Most of you, well, I'll be surprised if some, if not all of you, aren't already using Exchange. It is the world-leading messaging system used by the biggest companies in the world. The Cloud Exchange, it's very simple, very easy to set up against the traditional in-house deployment. It's just a few clicks and you're up and running. Again, you're only paying for what you need. So if you want to have more users, you can do so without the hassle and expense of worrying about hardware and adding more bits in and seeing if your kit will cope with it. High availability, as we mentioned earlier, 99.99% uptime that comes with all our cloud services. These days, obviously, email is an important business function, and we find ourselves lost without it, really. It's also worth mentioning that Exchange, the actual package, is very hardware intensive. So what that means is it requires a lot of processing power, it requires a lot of disk space, and a hell of a lot of RAM, of memory. So our Cloud Exchange eliminates the need to spend out on this expensive hardware that you need to run this slick email system. But it still gives you the high performance that your business needs from a typical email system. And Exchange running on a server, for example, with any other applications, it's going to drain that. It's going to kill any other applications. It takes the memory away. So it's not really worthwhile to have an in-house Exchange anymore. It's much easier to have a cloud-based email system. The deployment is carried out in a matter of minutes in comparison to the traditional rollout, which can take sometimes days to set up and configure a server. And again, that's going to save you time and it's going to save you money. Also available anywhere right from the get-go. You have it on your phone, your laptop, your home PC, overseas, and they're all fully synchronized. All of your subfolders, all of your set items are all fully synchronized over all of the other devices. Cloud implementation and support. Okay, so the Estate Agent Cloud, we have a team of specialists whose job it is every day is to implement clients onto the cloud. So during a typical migration, for example, certain things are obviously required to be done. Now, during this time, we understand your business needs to carry on functioning, and obviously we do our utmost to ensure that this is the case. During a migration, we would survey the current network for things like internet speeds, software applications, and then we'd advise you if anything obviously needs addressing before we proceed with the migration. If all is well, what we would do, we would take a copy of your data, we put it onto a secure drive, and we ship it direct to the data center where it's uploaded to the cloud server. At the same time, any applications would be installed and they would be tested on the cloud environment just to ensure they function normally. There's no reason why they wouldn't. Obviously, we like to make sure that everything's fine before we proceed. The cloud environment itself will be up and running in no time at all, and then all we would do is simply configure your devices to access that cloud environment. And this includes things like PCs, thin clients, smartphones, and iPads. We offer a full range of support services for your cloud solution, and obviously we work closely with all of our clients to ensure that every migration goes as smoothly as